The world watches in horror as bombs fall and tanks roll, but the most perilous battles are waged in the shadows, far from the front lines. This is the hidden war, a war of subversion, propaganda, and global power games, where the weapons are not bullets and bombs, but information, economics, and the manipulation of perception. In this war, the enemy is elusive. The lines between truth and fiction are blurred, and the victims often don't realize they are under attack. From the streets of Kiev to the halls of Washington, D.C., a struggle is unfolding that will shape the fate of nations and the future of the world order. This is not a war fought with armies and tanks, but with whispers and shadows, with the manipulation of economies and the control of narratives. It is a war that has been raging for decades, often unnoticed, but its consequences are becoming increasingly impossible to ignore. This is the story of that hidden war, a war being waged on multiple fronts, from the battlefields of Ukraine to the financial markets of Wall Street. Subversion is not a new phenomenon. Throughout history, empires have used covert means to weaken rivals. From the Trojan horse to the Cold War, the methods evolved, but the goal remains the same. Today, subversion is more sophisticated and pervasive. The internet, once a tool for democratization, is now fertile ground for subversion. Social media platforms amplify division and spread misinformation. Fake news and deepfakes blur the lines between reality and fabrication. Economic warfare is a key tool of subversion today. Manipulating markets and imposing sanctions can cripple economies. Economic pressure can force concessions and topple governments. NGOs, often funded by foreign powers, subtly advance their sponsors' interests. They influence politics and public opinion under the guise of neutrality.
In the hidden war, information is both weapon and battlefield. Propaganda shapes narratives, creates enemies, and rallies public support.
The 20th century saw mass media's rise and propaganda's global influence. The internet and social media have complicated the information landscape. It's easier to spread propaganda, but harder to control the narrative.
While bombs and bullets may dominate the headlines, the hidden war is often won or lost in the realm of finance. Economic control, the ability to influence or manipulate a nation's economy, is a potent weapon of subversion, capable of undermining governments, destabilizing societies, and bending entire nations to the will of foreign powers.
The Bretton Woods Agreement, signed in 1944, established the US dollar as the world's reserve currency, giving the United States unprecedented control over the global financial system. This control has been used to reward allies, punish adversaries, and shape the global economic landscape to serve American interests. International financial institutions, such as the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, and the World Bank, have also been accused of acting as instruments of economic subversion. These institutions, often dominated by Western powers, can impose harsh austerity measures on developing countries in exchange for loans, trapping them in cycles of debt and dependence. These policies, while often presented as necessary for economic stability, can have devastating social consequences, leading to poverty, inequality, and social unrest. The rise of multinational corporations has further complicated the landscape of economic control. These corporations, with their vast resources and global reach, wield immense power and influence, often surpassing that of nation-states. They can lobby governments, dictate trade policies, and exploit cheap labor and resources. Section 5. The Global Power Games, Unmasking the Players and Their Motives.
The hidden war is ultimately a struggle for power, a high-stakes game played by nations, institutions, and individuals vying for dominance on the world stage. To understand this conflict, we must identify the key players, their motivations, and the strategies they employ to advance their agendas.
At the heart of this struggle lies the United States, the world's sole superpower since the fall of the Soviet Union. With its unparalleled military might, economic dominance, and control over global institutions, the United States has long sought to maintain its position of primacy in the world order. This has led to a foreign policy often characterized by interventionism, regime change, and the pursuit of strategic interests, even at the expense of other nations' sovereignty.
Challenging this dominance are rising powers such as China and Russia, seeking to assert their own influence and reshape the existing world order. China, with its rapidly growing economy and military capabilities, is challenging American hegemony in Asia and beyond. Russia, seeking to reclaim its former superpower status, is asserting itself in its near-abroad and challenging NATO expansion in Eastern Europe.
Caught in the crossfire of this great power competition are smaller nations, often pawns in a geopolitical chess game played by more powerful actors. These nations, often struggling with their own internal challenges, can find themselves manipulated, exploited, and even invaded as larger powers vie for control of strategically important regions and resources. NATO's eastward march.
To understand the current conflict in Ukraine, one must delve into the history of NATO. Created in 1949, NATO expanded eastward after the Soviet Union's fall. This expansion saw former Soviet states joining NATO, alarming Moscow. Despite Russia's warnings, NATO's march continued, seen as a strategy to encircle Russia.
Section 2. A broken promise. The West's assurances to Russia.
Allegations arose that the West promised Moscow NATO would not expand eastward during Germany's reunification in 1990. Moscow saw these assurances as a binding commitment, despite disputes from Western officials.
NATO's expansion was viewed by Moscow as a betrayal, fueling deep mistrust and poisoning relations for years. This sense of betrayal led to a more confrontational approach in Russia's foreign policy. Seeds of discord in Ukraine.
Ukraine emerged as a key battleground in the struggle for influence in Eastern Europe. With its strategic location, Ukraine held immense geopolitical significance for both Moscow and the West. For Russia, Ukraine was a vital buffer state against NATO expansion.
The West saw Ukraine as a potential prize to isolate Russia and consolidate dominance. This competition played out in the political arena, with both sides supporting different factions.
In 2004, the Orange Revolution saw pro-Western Viktor Yushchenko come to power. The revolution signaled a potential shift in Ukraine's orientation away from Russia.
It deepened the political divide within Ukrainian society, exacerbating tensions. This division created fertile ground for external interference by both Russia and the West. Section 4. The coup of 2014, a turning point in East-West relations.
The situation in Ukraine came to a head in 2014 when pro-Russian President Viktor Yanukovych was ousted in what Moscow viewed as a Western-backed coup. The protests, known as the Euromaidan protests, began in November 2013 after Yanukovych suspended preparations for an association agreement with the European Union, opting instead to pursue closer ties with Russia.
The 2014 coup in Ukraine marked a turning point in East-West relations, shattering the fragile post-Cold War peace. Arming Ukraine, fueling the fire.
Russia swiftly moved to secure its interests in Ukraine, seizing Crimea after Yanukovych's ouster. A referendum, condemned by the West, saw Crimea vote to join Russia.
Russia's annexation of Crimea was supported domestically, but condemned internationally. This deepened the rift between Russia and the West, leading to sanctions.
In eastern Ukraine, pro-Russian separatists, allegedly backed by Moscow, clashed with Ukrainian forces.
The West provided Ukraine with military aid, fueling the conflict and increasing the death toll. Section 6. The Minsk Agreements. A failed attempt at peace. In an attempt to de-escalate the conflict, a series of ceasefires were negotiated, culminating in the Minsk Agreements, signed in September 2014 and February 2015. The Minsk Agreements, brokered by France, Germany, Russia, and Ukraine, aimed to end the fighting in eastern Ukraine and find a political solution to the conflict.
The agreements called for a ceasefire, the withdrawal of heavy weapons from the line of contact, constitutional reforms in Ukraine to grant greater autonomy to the separatist-held regions, and local elections in the east. However, the Minsk agreements proved difficult to implement, with both sides accusing each other of violating the ceasefire and failing to fulfill their commitments.
The conflict in eastern Ukraine dragged on for years, claiming the lives of thousands of people and displacing millions more. The Minsk agreements, while representing the best hope for peace, ultimately failed to end the fighting or bridge the deep political divide between Kiev and the separatist-held regions.
The failure of the Minsk agreements can be attributed to a number of factors, including the lack of trust between the warring parties, the involvement of external actors with their own agendas, and the difficulty of finding a political solution that could satisfy all sides. The Minsk agreements, while ultimately unsuccessful, did serve to freeze the conflict, preventing a full-scale war between Russia and Ukraine but leaving the underlying issues unresolved.
Section 7. NATO's Endgame, Containing Russia at All Costs. NATO played a crucial role in shaping the West's response in Ukraine, provided political and logistical support to Ukraine, strengthened its military presence in Eastern Europe, and imposed sanctions on Russia. NATO's actions were seen by Moscow as provocative, further fueling mistrust and confrontation.
Some analysts believe NATO aimed to bog Russia down in a protracted conflict, weakening it militarily and economically. This strategy aimed to turn Ukraine into a quagmire for Russia.
NATO's involvement in Ukraine came with significant risks. By arming and training Ukrainian forces, NATO risked escalating the conflict. NATO's expansion eastward further inflamed tensions.
NATO's actions in Ukraine raised questions about the alliance's true purpose. Was NATO still a defensive alliance or a tool of Western expansionism? The answer has profound implications for European security and international stability.
Section 8. The Human Cost of Geopolitics. Ukraine caught in the crossfire. Lost in the geopolitical maneuvering and power struggles between Russia and the West were the people of Ukraine, caught in the crossfire of a conflict not of their own making. The conflict in Ukraine had a devastating impact on the country, claiming the lives of thousands of civilians, displacing millions more, and destroying infrastructure and livelihoods.
The fighting in eastern Ukraine turned entire cities into rubble, with homes, schools, and hospitals reduced to ruins. The conflict also had a severe impact on the Ukrainian economy, with industrial output plummeting, unemployment soaring, and the currency collapsing. The humanitarian crisis in Ukraine became one of the worst in Europe since the end of the Cold War, with millions of people in need of food, water, shelter, and medical care.
The conflict in Ukraine also had a profound impact on Ukrainian society, deepening political divisions, fueling social unrest, and creating a climate of fear and mistrust. The war exacerbated existing tensions between pro-Russian and pro-Western Ukrainians, making it even more difficult to find common ground and build a shared future.
The human cost of the conflict in Ukraine is a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of geopolitical rivalries and the failure of diplomacy. It is a tragedy that innocent people are forced to pay the price for the ambitions of powerful actors and the inability of the international community to find peaceful solutions to complex crises.
War as an investment opportunity. The business of reconstruction. A different kind of battle is waged with spreadsheets and stock options.
Corporations see opportunity in the ashes of conflict. They calculate profits, positioning to reap rewards of rebuilding.
This is not a new phenomenon. War has always been intertwined with business, from the Opium Wars to the military-industrial complex.
The scale and sophistication of war profiteering is unprecedented. Corporations shape conflicts, aligning with nation-states.
The war in Ukraine has created a lucrative opportunity. Companies are eager to cash in on reconstruction. BlackRock's Ukrainian portfolio, a stake in conflict and recovery. One company that has attracted particular scrutiny for its involvement in Ukraine is BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager with over $10 trillion in assets under management.
BlackRock's vast financial resources and its influence in global markets give it unparalleled power to shape economic outcomes, and its actions in Ukraine have raised concerns about the role of corporate interests in conflict zones. In the months leading up to the Russian invasion, BlackRock invested heavily in Ukrainian government bonds, becoming one of the country's largest creditors. These investments, while potentially profitable if Ukraine's economy recovers, carry significant risks, especially given the ongoing conflict and the uncertainty surrounding the country's future.
BlackRock's involvement in Ukraine goes beyond mere investment. In November 2022, BlackRock CEO Larry Fink met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to discuss plans for a reconstruction platform to channel Western investment into rebuilding Ukraine's war-torn economy. This partnership, while presented as a philanthropic gesture, has raised concerns about BlackRock's potential influence over Ukraine's post-war reconstruction and the possibility that the company could profit from the country's misfortune.
Critics argue that BlackRock, by leveraging its financial clout, could push for policies that favor its own investments, potentially leading to privatization of state assets, deregulation of key industries, and austerity measures that disproportionately impact the most vulnerable segments of Ukrainian society. These concerns are not unfounded, given BlackRock's history of lobbying for its own interests and its track record of profiting from economic crises around the world.
The shadowy world of war profiteering, Cui Bono? BlackRock is just one player in a vast and shadowy network of corporations, investors, and government contractors who stand to profit from the war in Ukraine. This war economy, fueled by billions of dollars in military spending and reconstruction aid, incentivizes conflict, creating a perverse system where peace becomes a threat to profits.
The military-industrial complex, a term coined by President Dwight D. Eisenhower in his farewell address in 1961, plays a central role in this war economy. This complex, comprising defense contractors, lobbyists, and government officials, thrives on conflict, perpetuating a cycle of fear and militarism that benefits its members at the expense of peace and security.
The revolving door between government and the defense industry ensures that policies continue to favor military spending, even as social programs are cut and infrastructure crumbles. This influence peddling undermines democratic accountability, as corporate interests take precedence over the needs of citizens.
The war in Ukraine, with its insatiable demand for weapons, ammunition, and military equipment, has been a boon for defense contractors, who have seen their profits soar as the conflict drags on. These companies, with their vested interest in perpetuating war, have a powerful incentive to lobby for continued military support for Ukraine, even if it means prolonging the fighting and increasing the human cost. BlackRock's involvement in Ukraine, while troubling, is merely a symptom of a larger problem: the growing power of multinational corporations and their ability to shape global events to serve their own interests. This corporate capture of democracy has eroded public trust in institutions and fueled a sense of powerlessness among ordinary citizens.
International trade agreements, often negotiated in secret and favoring corporate interests over environmental and labor protections, have further tilted the playing field in favor of multinational corporations. These agreements, with their investor-state dispute settlement mechanisms, allow corporations to sue governments for lost profits, chilling environmental regulations, and undermining national sovereignty.
The rise of tax havens and shell companies has allowed corporations and wealthy individuals to shield their assets from taxation, depriving governments of trillions of dollars in revenue that could be used to fund public services and address pressing social problems. This tax avoidance scheme, facilitated by a network of lawyers, accountants, and bankers, exacerbates inequality and undermines the social contract.
The war in Ukraine has exposed the fault lines in this system, highlighting the dangers of allowing corporate interests to dictate foreign policy and shape the global economic order. As the world grapples with the consequences of this conflict, it is imperative to question the role of corporations in perpetuating war and to demand a more just and equitable system that prioritizes human needs over corporate greed.
As the war in Ukraine grinds on, the international community is beginning to grapple with the daunting task of rebuilding the country. The World Bank estimates that the cost of reconstruction could reach hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars, dwarfing previous post-conflict reconstruction efforts.
The question of who will pay for this reconstruction is a contentious one. Western governments, already facing economic challenges at home, are hesitant to commit vast sums of taxpayer money to rebuilding a country still mired in conflict. Ukraine, its economy in ruins, is in no position to shoulder the burden of reconstruction alone.
This is where corporations like BlackRock come in, offering their financial resources and expertise to fill the void left by governments. However, this corporate involvement in reconstruction comes with strings attached, as these companies are not charities but profit-driven entities seeking a return on their investment.
The danger is that Ukraine, desperate for investment and eager to rebuild, will be forced to make concessions to these corporate benefactors, potentially sacrificing its long-term economic sovereignty for short-term gains. The reconstruction of Ukraine, therefore, presents both an opportunity and a challenge, an opportunity to rebuild the country in a more just and equitable way, but also a challenge to ensure that this reconstruction benefits the Ukrainian people, not just corporate interests.
In the 21st century, decisive battles are fought in the realm of information. This is the information battlefield, where perceptions are molded and public opinion is swayed. It is a battle fought with bytes and pixels, where victors control the flow of information.
This information war is not new. Propaganda has been a tool of statecraft for centuries. What is new is the speed, reach, and sophistication of these operations.
The internet, once a democratizing force, is now a double-edged sword. It facilitates information spread, but also fosters propaganda and disinformation.
Section 2. The American Narrative. Shaping global opinion since World War II.
The U.S. emerged as a superpower post World War II, using propaganda to promote democracy, capitalism, and American leadership. The United States Information Agency, created in 1953, countered Soviet propaganda through various media. Hollywood films also became powerful vehicles for American soft power.
Section 3. Manufacturing consent. The media's role in U.S. propaganda.
The U.S. media landscape is dominated by a few powerful corporations, leading to a narrowing of perspectives and a decline in investigative journalism. Critics argue that the media often uncritically parrots the government's line on foreign policy, failing to provide context or challenge official narratives. The media's role in promoting the 2003 invasion of Iraq is a case in point, highlighting the dangers of media complicity in government propaganda.
Section 4. The CNN Effect, 24/7 News, and the Short Attention Span of Democracy.
The rise of 24-hour cable news networks has led to a decline in the quality and depth of news coverage, often resorting to sensationalism and speculation. The CNN Effect describes how 24-hour news coverage can influence government policy by focusing attention on particular crises. The rise of social media has further exacerbated these trends, creating an environment where misinformation and echo chambers are rampant.
Social media, the new frontier of information warfare.
Social media platforms have become powerful tools for communication, but also for manipulating public opinion and interfering in elections. The 2016 U.S. presidential election highlighted the vulnerability of social media to manipulation by foreign entities. Social media platforms have also been used to suppress dissent and silence critical voices.
Controlling the narrative. Censorship and the suppression of dissent.
Censorship, the suppression of speech or information deemed harmful, is anathema to a free society. In the digital age, censorship has taken on new forms, with governments and corporations monitoring and controlling the flow of information online. The suppression of dissent is often a precursor to tyranny, making it essential to protect freedom of expression.
Breaking free from the matrix. Cultivating media literacy in the digital age.
Media literacy is the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, and create media in various forms. Cultivating media literacy is essential for navigating the information landscape and resisting manipulation. Media literacy empowers individuals to participate in democratic discourse and advocate for a more just world.
Section 8. The power of independent media. A counterforce to propaganda.
Independent media outlets play a vital role in providing alternative perspectives and holding power to account. The rise of the internet and social media has created new opportunities for independent media to reach wider audiences. Supporting independent media is crucial for ensuring a diversity of voices and critical perspectives.
Section 1. Cultivating critical thinking, the foundation of media literacy.
Critical thinking is the ability to analyze information objectively, questioning its validity and bias. Developing critical thinking skills requires questioning and evaluating everything you read, see, or hear. Being aware of cognitive biases helps mitigate their impact on your perception of information.
Section 2. Diversifying your information sources, a holistic approach.
Diversifying your sources of information protects you from biased or incomplete narratives. Incorporate international news outlets, independent media, and academic journals into your daily reading. Following thought leaders and subject matter experts on social media can complement traditional news sources.
Section 3. Recognizing and countering misinformation. Tools and techniques.
Fact-checking and recognizing common signs of misinformation are crucial for staying informed. Reverse image search helps verify the authenticity of images. Engaging in digital hygiene practices protects against malicious actors and misinformation. Engaging in constructive dialogue with others is a powerful way to build resilience against subversion and misinformation. By fostering open, respectful conversations, you can challenge false narratives, share reliable information, and strengthen the collective media literacy of your community.
Start by creating spaces for dialogue, whether online or offline, where individuals feel safe to express their views and question information. Encourage a culture of curiosity and skepticism, where questioning and critical thinking are valued over passive acceptance of information. This can be done through community forums, discussion groups, or social media platforms.
When engaging in dialogue, focus on listening actively and empathetically. Understand the perspectives and concerns of others before presenting your own views. This approach helps in building trust and respect, making it easier to introduce new information and challenge misinformation.
Use evidence-based arguments to support your points. When discussing contentious issues, refer to credible sources and provide verifiable facts. This not only strengthens your position, but also demonstrates the importance of relying on reliable information.
Finally, be patient and persistent. Changing minds takes time, and people are often resistant to new information that contradicts their beliefs. Approach these conversations with humility and an openness to learning, recognizing that constructive dialogue is a continuous process that requires effort and commitment. Supporting independent media is crucial for maintaining a diverse and vibrant information landscape. Independent media outlets are often at the forefront of investigative journalism and critical reporting, providing essential checks on power that are vital for a healthy democracy.
One way to support independent media is through financial contributions. Many independent outlets rely on donations, subscriptions, and grants to fund their operations. By subscribing to or donating to these outlets, you help ensure they have the resources to continue their important work.
Additionally, promote independent journalism by sharing their work on social media and recommending them to others. Amplifying their reach helps these outlets gain visibility and influence, countering the dominance of mainstream media.
Engage with independent media critically and constructively. Provide feedback, participate in discussions, and contribute to the dialogue. By actively engaging with these outlets, you help create a community of informed and engaged citizens.
Finally, advocate for policies that support media diversity and protect press freedom. This includes opposing media consolidation, supporting public broadcasting, and defending the rights of journalists. By advocating for a robust and diverse media landscape, you help safeguard the essential role of the Fourth Estate in holding power to account and informing the public.
Supporting independent media and fostering a culture of critical thinking, dialogue, and media literacy are essential steps in protecting yourself from subversion and ensuring a well-informed society. The whispers have become roars. The shadows have stretched across continents. The hidden war now echoes through the fabric of our lives. We have traced the threads of manipulation that bind nations. NATO's Eastward march awakened old ghosts of Cold War rivalry. The information battlefield defines our time. The true cost is etched in human suffering. Yet, amidst the ruins, there are glimmers of hope. Unmasking this hidden war is a victory against darkness. By questioning the narratives, we can build resistance. This documentary is a testament to truth, courage, and the human spirit. The battle for our minds, for our hearts, for the very soul of humanity is not a spectator sport. It is a battle that demands our active participation, our unwavering commitment to truth, and our refusal to be pawns in someone else's game. The weapons of this war are not bullets and bombs, but critical thinking, informed skepticism, and the courage to question even the most deeply held beliefs. We must become discerning consumers of information, seeking out diverse perspectives, verifying claims, and recognizing the subtle ways in which propaganda seeps into our lives. We must support independent media, hold our leaders accountable, and engage in constructive dialogue with those who hold different views. And we must never underestimate the power of our own voices, our own actions, to make a difference. The hidden war is not a battle that will be won on a single battlefield, nor will it be won overnight. It is a generational struggle, a constant push and pull between the forces of manipulation and the enduring human desire for truth, justice, and freedom. This is our call to action. Awaken to the unseen battle. Arm yourselves with knowledge and courage, and join the fight for a world where truth prevails, where justice triumphs.